Hello, it's Joanna Toch of Family Law Cafe with the Family Law Cafe podcast. I'm very excited today. We've got Sarah McIntyre here. She is a specialist in narcissism, which does occur in a fair few family cases. I think I may have seen it one or two times, and I know there's a huge amount of interest in this area. My personal view is there's a little bit of misinformation out there, and I'd like to see if we can explore what the truths and realities are and the impacts. So Sarah, really welcome to the Family Law Cafe podcast. Can you tell us about you and your what you do and what we're then going to go and talk about, which is narcissism. So let's hear about you.
I have to say, first of all, the first time that I met you was because we were dealing with there was a chap getting divorced and you became his barrister. This was before Family Law Cafe days. And I was working for the couple, and then I was working for this chap. And within 15 minutes of our meeting, he was much relieved, like he'd understood anything. But you'd also gauged that this divorce, which subsequently I can now talk about as a case of a narcissistic partner who was being divorced, you said to me, "Now, Sarah, you're a very young woman." And I think I was 34 or 35 at the time. I thought, "Oh, thank you. Yes, I am." And you said to me, "Is this what you want to be doing with your time?" So in that brief 15 minutes, not only had you scoped the whole of the case, but you knew this wasn't going to be over in 6 months. This was going to be a long and protracted case, which it was. It was 3 years in the end. And it was, I think at the time, I didn't realise the significance of the question, although I noted it. I thought, oh, that's what she's asking me.
What is she talking about?
Innocent, really innocent. I was like, why is she asking me that? But later on, it was really good of you because you have to really be committed. These cases are all consuming. They will take up all of your time, and you can be back and forth to court so many times. So you have to be sure that you're up for it. But more than that, it sort of directed me towards becoming a psychotherapist. So I already had ideas that this is work I would like to do. And I've worked in education with students that have been kicked out of college, senior tutor at one university. And that's for all the kids that are failing in some reason. You know, they send them to you, and you have to deal with that. So I'd already been predisposed to dealing with people who were in crisis. But that case that we were both involved in different ways, showed me that there is such a spectrum of human behaviour that is utterly fascinating, but can be also very sinister. And back then, I don't think narcissism was really well known. It wasn't, it was, yes, you could call someone a narcissist. You thought they were vain or grandiose or had big ideas about themselves. But for it to become a psychological term, for someone to have narcissistic personality disorder and all that that entails, this is becoming better both spoken about, understood, and anyone who's got social media now will have heard loads on narcissism. You did ask me how I came to this. So I was an academic.
But thank you for reminding me. And I don't remember saying that, but it does sound like something I would say. And I think that we had a big conference and you were there to assist, and you still are, a young woman. And I did work it out straight away that this would go all the way, and this person was completely unreasonable. And I would say, if you're dealing with this kind of case, either just accept, okay, let's just cut my losses. But if you are going to go into the legal arena against someone of that nature, you've got to be prepared to go all the way and be committed to it. There's no half measures, because there's no half measures with them. So it sounds as if something I would say. And obviously you did lots of work in, and you stayed through. And it all worked out in the end. But yes, so thank you for reminding me about that.
No, it's really good. He was so relieved. And it is such a relief to come into an understanding environment, because your friends don't really understand it. His friends didn't really understand it. Of course, they're splitting into two teams. Oh, well, maybe it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's absolutely not when you're divorcing a narcissist. And I just want to reassure everyone at home. Certain behaviours are absolutely extreme. They're intolerable. And it's not you, it is them.
And just to throw into that then you come into an arena where the judge has to be making a decision about two people in a situation. And the judge doesn't want to just jump into one side. The judge wants to be fair, so they can exploit that. Because, and that is the job of the judge, to sort of referee the thing and to come to a fair outcome. So when you have someone who is so unreasonable, then when you have a reasonable person, or something probably you heard me say as well, you have a reasonable person and an unreasonable person, they pull the reasonable person across because the judge is trying to find the middle ground. Yeah. So sometimes the outcome can be quite unreasonable. It won't be as far as they want to pull you. So they pull the case over, and you do have to then establish and keep reminding the court, no, this is a reasonable, and then they will click, and hopefully if you'll get sometimes you don't get the same judge at some stage, they will see that. So yes, I keep interrupting because we're both fascinated by this, and obviously I've been dealing with this for so many years now.
Yeah, I think in that case we knew it was going to take a long time, but I didn't think I didn't really perceive how long it would take. And subsequently I've learnt so much, I've retrained.
So you were in education then, weren't you? At a high level, you're very well educated. Don't be modest here. I remember seeing extremely well educated. I think you were at Oxford.
I was at Cambridge.
Cambridge, I'm so sorry.
I was 5 years at Cambridge, and I studied German philosophy, but mainly ethics. So I was always looking at the history of German idealism and then German existential philosophy, particularly the work of Martin Heidegger, who is a narcissist, I think, made up this sort of great vision of what it means to be human. And
this is Man and Superman.
Man and Superman. No, that's more Nietzsche.
So I'm so sorry.
In the same way, they are the existentialist philosophers. And then when I was a student, I lectured there for a while on Freud, and that gave me the link into the psychology. So instead of thinking just in the abstract and abstract concepts about what it means to be a person, to then take it into everyday scenarios and what does it mean in the history of a person's life and how their childhood affects them growing up and these sorts of things. So through an academic route.
Which at first then you used in education.
Yes.
And so, as I'm understanding that this case is sort of interesting, you thought, did you then take a change of direction with your career?
By a few different steps on the way. Yeah. When the opportunity arose during lockdown to really take stock, where do I want my career to go? I knew that was the time to go all out into doing psychotherapy. And I'm very much focused on the therapeutic part of the work. So getting a diagnosis is great, and you feel great, and you get the language to understand what's going on and what's happening in this situation. But to get over the situation, to move on from it, to park that pain, to feel better after having a particular experience, that's the bit I focus on. So I call myself an existential psychotherapist.
So you're an existential psychotherapist.
But that's really the lens that I understand the problem with. That's my worldview. So the themes within that are being authentic, so understanding the different roles that we play. We turn up as different people in work, at home, with our children, the different faces that we have. So being authentic, who's the uniting person in all of that? An understanding of death. People don't like to talk about death, but to see that, get context. You have this life. It might be 90 years. What are you going to do with it? Are you going to take the short-term hit for the long-term goal? You're going to do this relationship forever. So that's how it might play out in context. And then I don't do online work. So I only work with people. There is something phenomenal about being in the room with another human being. And there's, your brains are coming into sync. Your pheromones are talking to each other. You're seeing all of the micro signals from their face and their body, and you don't get that online. So very occasionally I might talk to a client in between a session, catch up with them, check in with them, but I always have to have that face-to-face encounter first.
And just to throw in that we offer our services online, but I always say, you're right, then people just drop in and it's just really nice to meet them. And, there's a cafe side, have a coffee, come in and meet us. And with court hearings, absolutely. I mean, I did in fact, the judge wasn't happy at all, rightly so, because it was all about credibility. And the judge said, no, this witness has to be here. This witness didn't attend. And the other side said, oh, no, he couldn't fly or whatever. I mean, it was a little bit ridiculous. At one stage we stopped because his wife was at the back texting him, and we could see his, he was going lower and lower. So he was obviously looking at his phone. So there was that as well. But you have to have the witnesses there. You have to be in court. So my view is we should use the convenience of online when it's just about maybe directions or for us, assembling your papers or having quick meetings. But I absolutely understand that to really go deep and get to grips, you need to have.
Well, I think at the time, particularly on the case that we were both involved in, if you could do everything online with regards to procedures, that would be great. But to get through the case, you sort of need to park the emotion a lot.
Yeah, true.
It's not the time to deal with how you're going to live the rest of your life. It's just the time to focus on getting the hell out as cleanly, as quickly as possible.
It's not a place you want to be.
You don't want to stay there. You're going through hell, keep going, just eyes front. Yes. And this is the difficulty.
Yeah.
When you have someone who has been engaged in a relationship where there is narcissistic abuse. Now, you've already covered, I've watched 2 really good podcasts with you. Ranj Chowell, he spoke about mental health and abuse within relationships.
Yeah.
And Jules Anderson as well talked about well-being within. And so, you've already covered the types of abuse and the types of trauma that goes on in relationship breakdown. But narcissistic abuse has a whole set of flavors all of its own that are distinctive, that mark it out from
just routine abuse.
Just routine abuse, yes.
That's enough of that. And tell us what marks out. So I have people, and we'd had someone actually who phoned in who wanted to work with us. I actually picked up, I'm going to say, I didn't want to work with her because everything she said, she was saying that the other side was a narcissist. Just put her off. And luckily she went elsewhere, and I was very happy with that because I could tell from the things she was saying, I'm pretty alert to this, that this woman was a narcissist but she wanted to frame the husband. She wanted complete control over everything, and luckily she went somewhere where she would get that. If she'd come to us, I think I would have had a problem. It wouldn't have worked. And I obviously would have done my best. But tell me, because I'm not trained, I'm a lawyer, but I obviously 34 years of this and dealing with different people's abuse, there's a sort of pattern, there's a sort of playbook of different types of abuse that I see. So what are we looking for?
The narcissist, there are a lot of drug parallels, both for the narcissist themselves and the victim of narcissistic abuse. So the first parallel, if you look at the narcissist, you'll hear a lot of talk about they need supply. The narcissist has created this false vision of themselves, probably in order to avoid their own childhood traumas or insecurities, inadequacies. So they've created this false self. And they're constantly looking for someone or something, some situation, event, or person who can create that situation or event to make them feel that this fantasy is actually real. So someone who's going to support that vision they have of themselves. And you'll hear it referred to as supply. They need supply. They need this constant attention. They need adoration. They want you to love them, adore them. They want you to see them as special and other, and they'll behave in a really grandiose way. And it can be very charming and very exciting and very alluring.
Exciting, isn't it? To be with someone and you think that that's true, I guess.
But the cracks set in when you have to constantly be supporting this dream that they have of themselves. And in the end, it can't last. Because also, you might think you've done
because it's a false thing.
It's a false
not
self
authentic.
Anyway. It's not real. They are not the best at this and the best at that and the best at work. And they're not. But they have this sense of self that, yes, they are. They are above and apart and different to other people. And they cling to that vision of themselves completely. So they're getting this supply from their partner, and their partner, in the first instances, they're probably love bombed, and this partner becomes everything to them. It's the centre of their universe.
So they are love bombing.
They are,
because I notice, it's always a flag to me, let's say it's the man who's a narcissist, the woman's pregnant within 3 months. It's always like sort of 3 months.
Whirlwind.
It's always whirlwind. It's always just so exciting. And often then they have a child together. And so, of course, then that's another dynamic. That's what I've seen.
Yeah. Taking the attention away to the baby and not giving the adoring attention to
I may be wrong, but it's meaning that person then has to stay with them. And I have cases whereby then that person's trying to leave, and then you've got the complexity that they're expecting a child, and obviously their hormones are all confused. It's just another, I don't want to get you into another area.
That brings us into the parallels. So you've got the drug addiction that the narcissist wants this constant supply of attention, and they'll get it from their partner, but they might also get it from somebody else's partner, wife, husband, or someone at work, or some situation. So they're always looking
for someone to support that image.
So you might be a trophy one day, and you might be really cramping their style the next, and you'll feel it. It's like, don't you want to be seen?
And is it right that, I mean, I remember, this is a long time ago, someone told me, she came to me for divorce, that the husband was constantly cheating on her. I mean, in an awful way. It was awful. Just beautiful woman in every sense, you know, looks-wise, and just, you know, beautiful nature, just a lovely woman. And it was just so sad to hear. And she just kept saying, oh, you know, the thing is, everyone loves him and he's so amazing. And sadly, in that case, well, not sadly, it's their lives. You know, he then decided to come back. He wanted to keep both relationships. Is that a common thing as well? I see men that would do that, and they think
convince you that it's normal. But it's
that's normal, and the
because
wife is saying
he has extra needs because he's so fabulous. You know, you should really understand that he has all these,
and that's okay.
And that's okay. But then that leads us to the
and to finish that, she then later on, because it was a referral from someone, some relative, someone I knew, and I actually then later on met this man. I was like, he was just such a boring person. But she, in her own mind, I was expecting to see such an incredible man who was so, and I had no idea why she was staying with him. She was the beautiful woman.
She was so age-old question. Yes. Why battered wives, as it used to be called? You know, people, domestic violence, coercive control. Financial abuse at home, violence, all of this. Why do they stay? And that's the second drugs parallel.
So we've got the narcissist who needs his supply and has to keep this image, and it could be from their partner and from other people.
He's
and from
always
other
looking for supply.
Is it a male, female? Where
there are statistically more male narcissists than female narcissists, but I think in the world of social media, I think it might be becoming more level.
And also, it's, you know, a little bit like autism, where it was seen as a much more male phenomenon. But now there's a discussion about whether women present in a different way, that they still have this, but they're more socialised. And I just wonder whether that could, I don't know.
I think so. I think probably because we still live in a patriarchal society, you will see the male narcissist who might be a CEO or earning a lot of money or very successful or famous. So it will present itself in a traditional way. That doesn't mean that women, there aren't workplace female narcissists at play. There are. But in my experience, it's usually a man. But that's not.
I just wonder if they have more opportunity and more... and to be fair to the narcissist, more expectation and those. And obviously, if you can create a very strong image of, and I'm sure we can think of people in public life who may have these traits, but that can be seen as successful, and people want to follow them, and they can become very successful in that way, having those traits. So
there's that he needs his supply, or she needs her supply. The narcissist is constantly looking for attention, and that's the sort of, it's like a drug for them. In a real sense, there is chemistry going on for the person who's the victim of the narcissist. And I'll use victim because I think they are victims of it. Nothing happens overnight. This is an insidious thing that happens over a long period of time. And people find themselves in these abusive relationships, and they might try and leave several times before they actually leave the relationship. And it's a trap. It's a trap. I've heard that, you know, if you get on the wrong train, the quicker you can get off, the cheaper it's going to be. If you stay on the wrong train for longer, it's going to cost you a lot more to get back. And the getting back is really the person having completely lost themselves to the world of the narcissist and this fantasy of the narcissist. And their self-worth is on the floor because they're just constantly trying to hold this person's self together.
I've got so many questions. I don't want to interrupt because it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a specific type of person that suits a narcissist? Or I don't know.
Yeah, there is an answer to that. And I've come to it over time. So in my experience, it transcends. You can be a victim of narcissistic abuse across any class, creed, colour, race, religion, age, gender. Nothing will preclude you from it.
Open to all, yeah.
But what is key is that there is a tendency for people who have experienced trauma in childhood. So whether that is that they have a narcissistic parent, or they have, let's just say in general terms, a parent who is inconsistent or unpredictable. Just those traits, they're unpredictable. And those children grow up to get themselves into relationships where people treat them badly. And instead of going, what's up this?
What is this?
They try and make the
recognise it, I
like
suppose.
them.
Yeah.
They're constantly trying to get the bad. I can win them over. I just need to do this. I can work. And then there's sort of some glory in it because they're the only person. And the narcissist might feed into that. So you're the only person that understands me. You're the only person in my whole life that has been able to, tolerate
so you have
my
someone
foibles.
who's maybe very successful, could be doing very well in life. And is it because, that's something that, although you don't think it through, but you recognise it. And isn't there this suggestion that, the relationship with your parents, that you, obviously at that stage you're a child, so you can't control it. But I guess as an adult and you meet someone just like your mum or just like your dad. So maybe, I just wonder if that's...
Yeah, having craved to get out of that situation and away from that parent, well, I'm never doing that, to find yourself in a relationship where you are replicating.
And maybe succeeding in this one.
Is part of the soul-destroying destruction of self that keeps them in the relationship longer. It's very demoralising to think that you're this cliche that you've just dated your father or just dated someone just like your mother.
Even if you see that.
Even if you see it. But this is the point. If you can understand what's going on with your brain chemistry, if you can understand yourself in a state of addiction, I'm in a state of addiction.
So this is the drugs.
This is the drug. So they give you all this oxytocin and dopamine. They're exciting, they're loving towards you. You have great chemistry. Everyone describes this amazing feeling of the narcissist. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, and you won't see it coming, they're going to cut you to the quick. And the shock at the time leads to complete disbelief. Did it happen? Did I understand? Did I read that right?
Is it me?
Was it? And then was it me? You've got it. Was it me? And then the person trying to turn themselves inside out to make themselves the problem. It's not them, it must be me. And then this, this insidious self-destruction of that person's will over time. And it can happen to anyone. The highest profile, most intellectual people, loveliest people, kindest people can become subject to this self-destruction via the behaviour of the narcissist. And they're so adept at it. If they're from childhood, they're used to somebody just going crazy and trashing the house in the background, and they're just carrying on as normal, or reading the room very well and preempting someone's mood and looking for all those subtle signals to read whether they're in a good mood or a bad mood, and shall I raise this thing now or shall I wait till later? This constant hypervigilance, but a subconscious hypervigilance. They're not even aware that they're so attuned to reading the needs of this other person. And it goes back to, as a child, the primary caregiver has to love you unconditionally because your life depends on it. It's not because you might like it. It's that if your primary caregiver isn't good to you, you will die. So when you understand it in that primal sense, it's going to be quite hard to break. You've got to forgive yourself when you're an adult and you're still in that pattern. Your monkey brain is going, but they've got to love me, otherwise I'll die. Survival here, survival. And it's still resonant in them as an adult. But I think if you can understand that.
So people are in this situation and then What about where children are in the mix? Because as I say, I see situations where it seems to me, the partner is pregnant very quickly, there's on-off relationship, and it comes into court, the court doesn't understand it at all. And then they will, in litigation, in a children case, for example, start talking about the mother being alienating or the mother's this, and just keep putting these very false narratives. And the courts seem to sort of lap it up.
Everything the narcissist is, they will accuse their partner of.
Yeah.
And they can drive the partner to complete insanity, where they react. So they take it, but they're so provoked. And then one day they explode. And then the narcissist just sits there going, well, you've got an anger issue, look at you.
Yeah.
And they might film it. And you're right, the court. Yeah. I like to think, because it's in common parlance, that it's on Instagram, that you've got, Diary of a CEO doing talks with Matthew Hussey or specialists, that that it's becoming more understood. But there is a part of me that says, unless you've experienced it firsthand, you don't know.
I also think that, going back to my explanation before, that the judge's role, so say this comes into court either in finances or children, then the magistrates or the judges, they have to look at each case as if everyone's completely normal, which is crazy, because usually if you're in court, I mean, like 85% of cases, there's going to be someone who's got a drink, drugs, mental health, in some way there's going to be a problem. You wouldn't really be in court otherwise. You wouldn't be able to work it out. So they have to treat everyone fairly, rightly so. And so it seems to me that narcissists can absolutely thrive in this environment, because it's a platform.
Absolutely. It's the best stage they've ever had. And I think they take some enjoyment from it, the power.
Yes.
And that's the thing. You get a team together to help fight this case. And you all think you're fighting the demon, and you're all on the same page, and you've got an action plan, and everyone's knows what they have to do, and you're pressing forward. And then you've got one team member who's still in love with the demon.
Which is maybe the client.
Which is the client. Yeah. And amidst of your instruction, please go away and do these things.
Yeah.
They've agreed to meet up.
Yeah.
And they've been bombarded with, but I love you. Why wouldn't you accept 11%? Why wouldn't you? If you loved me and the children, that's what you would do. You're not supposed to care about money. You're a Christian. So being so manipulated, and to someone who's not in one of these relationships, that's obviously manipulation. And don't be silly. Of course, that's not the case. But to someone who has gone between all of this lovely oxytocin and dopamine and love bomb going off in their brain, to suddenly hitting rock bottom, adrenaline, cortisol, what have I done? And the person might be violent or can turn, or, from very happy 1 minute to, in an instant, in the blink of an eye, being someone completely different, showing up completely different, or having this wonderful persona, as you've described. He's so charismatic and everyone loves him. And then behind closed doors, it's Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah.
And so they go between those two things. And then it's the person who has stabbed them, who has maybe literally stabbed them, is the one who's now calming them, and don't worry. You're seeking your reconciliation from the person that has harmed you. You're seeking the healing from the person that has harmed you. And that's a real cognitive dissonance for the person. And the confusion that comes from that, it's very difficult to deal with. But I think the first step is understanding it. At that point, your brain is operating as if you were a drug addict.
So you, as the victim, which you've said is a term that can be used, let's say you are the wife here, if you recognise this, are you saying that you're very likely to slip back? You have to understand that you've become addicted.
Yeah. Yeah, that you've been caught into this abuse cycle. And I think they know. I think the person does know that this is bad for them. That's why they've
on an intellectual level.
On an intellectual level. But they're still sobbing their heart out because they would just love one more time to feel
how it was.
That maybe that person wasn't all these horrible things. Because that is the awful thing. They've shown you that they have the capacity to be fantastic.
Yeah. And you just want that to happen again.
And you just want them, if you could just will them to do that bit again. But they can't. They can't.
And then the fear of the future.
Yeah.
Being on your own, not having enough money, that the children might spend half the time with that person and you're not there to protect them. I think that can be a huge issue.
No, of course.
Because they will present in such a way that, and they'll be saying, well, this is what should happen, this is the normal thing. And so there's all of that fear.
A lot of fear. It's extremely difficult. These cases cost at least a third more than average divorce cases, and they go on for, I think, half the time extra on average.
Yeah, I would,
even longer.
Well, because don't forget all the people that just sort things out without even coming to the lawyers, and extremely reasonable. And so I think that there's probably 10 to 15% of cases with the narcissist, and I've never thought about this before, but I'd actually say that it's likely to be 80% more complicated, actually.
Yeah.
If you compare it to how you could just, be really sensible, you could just go to mediation. It's acceptable not to have exactly the same views when you're separating. Of course it is. But
and in the midst of that, you've got the person that might occasionally join the other team.
Yeah.
And it can be demoralizing for your whole circuit that you're supporting this person.
Yeah.
And they seem to be, and you've left them, they seem to be, they get it, they know that this isn't good for them, this is unhealthy, this is unreasonable behaviour. And then one phone call or one email that is designed by the narcissist to throw them off. So they might know there's a court deadline coming up and they need to submit XY documents, and they take time.
Yeah.
So they're going to blow up a whole other issue that's nothing to do with the proceedings, that they know will completely occupy the person so that they are unable to comply.
It's probably why I said to you, isn't it? Are you in for? I was probably thinking, if she's just here for a few months, then maybe we won't start with her. And obviously, you were there helping and working, because there needs to be a strategy, and it's not for me as a lawyer to tell people what to do. I need them to understand and buy into it, because otherwise, obviously, as you say, they're incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to spend the time at the beginning, because no point starting any of this unless you're going to finish. And I always say to people, it will get worse before it gets better. And people don't know when it's going to end. I'll say, no, it will end. It will be fine. In the end.
I have to say that was so reassuring, because it did exactly as you described. It did get worse. And there was companies, shared companies and properties. And fortunately, no sort of adult children, so that wasn't. But there was a dog involved and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of childish skullduggery, which went from, I mean, that sounds very light and playful, but at the other end, it was all, borderline criminal, not quite, but breaking into buildings and turning off servers and shutting down businesses or bad mouthing. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. And I think the recovery time for someone after one of these relationships can be quite long. They can be trauma bonded for years after.
Yeah, trauma bonding, tell us.
This is the phenomenon. This is the brain chemistry where they are just hoping to get that dopamine hit again, when the person just stops being awful and was just how they were when they first got together, or those brief moments where they had a great time. And the trauma bond is that you're just looking for that rush of oxytocin and dopamine that only they can give you. And of course, the best way out of that is recognize recognize this is what your brain's doing. It's not so voluntary. There's something physiological going on with you. And if you can provide yourself with higher levels of oxytocin and dopamine yourself.
Oh, interesting.
Through peace.
A different way.
And calm, in a
yes,
different
to start
way.
Looking after yourself.
Yes.
Because it has to come from you, doesn't it? Any change has to come from you. Yeah. I mean, we can say all these things but the narcissists themselves, as you've said, that's come from somewhere. They've had some trauma. This is their way of dealing with life. They can't change themselves. I mean, I do cases where, sadly, the saddest ones in a way for me are the children cases, where eventually the court says, well, let's get a psychological profile. And that brings up all sorts of things, and people are properly tested, and then it may come up that they have narcissistic tendencies, and then you start saying, oh yeah, and you've always seen it before anyway. And those heartbreaking cases where in the end this is the parent of the other child, so you can't just eliminate them. But so, it's working around that. So, but it has to come from you, doesn't it? You have to make the changes yourself. And your self-care, and start giving yourself that supply. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. And it's incredibly difficult. I think anyone who's come out of a narcissistically abusive relationship will say, that's the hardest thing I ever did.
Yeah.
And I think where children are weaponized, of course the narcissist will use that. That you're just hurting the children, you're hurting the children's future.
And the children are going to have... And you see these cases where the children are very damaged in that situation. Because children generally, I find, they want to be fair. So they want to be fair. So
the cycle starts again.
Yeah, exactly. The cycle starts again. So you might have the narcissistic parent who's, making them feel guilty, making them feel it's their responsibility to make decisions. And it's never their responsibility. It's the parent's responsibility. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said, these children are fine, because often then it will be, let's look into what the problem is with the child. And there's usually no problem with the child. It's a problem with the adults.
Tired, perhaps brokering a very fractious relationship that can be volatile, violent, or maybe just silent treatment at home, and then watching both parents suffer. I mean, I've never seen a narcissist actually voluntarily come to therapy. I don't think they can recover.
Well, that's another thing. So that happens in court. So often, usually the answer to these reports is the professional expert will say, so it might be because one child, let's say one child is refusing to see the other parent at all. So the courts want to do something about that. So they find out more about the family. And usually it's they need to go to family therapy, and then that doesn't happen. There's cases that I deal with where there's a court order and it is breached by one parent. And what I find, this is quite a common one, that when a child gets to they'll obey the order until the child gets to a certain age. And then in the back of their mind, they know that then, wishes and feelings of the child is going to be heard. And so then they get the child to align with them and reject the other parent. And that's the parent who's got so much to offer. Has got so much to offer. And and then in the end, the courts are, we can't really do anything. So I suppose I come back to the law can only do so much in that situation. So, I mean, we need to finish. I'd love to keep talking, and I hope anyone watching this just put some comments in. Comments for Dr. Sarah, and you are a doctor, aren't you?
Not a medical doctor.
Not a medical, but a philosophy.
Yes.
Years of experience. And how do you deal with this now? How do you help people?
I think giving people the tools to start with, which is the terminology. Know that this is a thing. When they do that awful behaviour, that's a thing. That's called coercive control. That's called gaslighting, when they tell you something didn't happen that you really sure did happen. Or that your context is wrong, or all of these excuses. So you get some language to get hold of what is actually happening to you. You then have to look at why you got into this situation and were they always like that. That's probably work for later on. But getting your support network there, and I would say understanding that your brain is not working with you at the moment. Your brain is thinking in the way that an addict would think.
Right.
So every time you feel like you want to run back to that situation, or you want to give them the benefit of the doubt again, or you want to meet them even though you're in the middle of court proceedings because they're crying, or because they're using the children again, so you just want to get back connected. Don't. Because your brain is playing tricks on you, and you know, and it's like being an adult. And I treat that like addiction. Sort of, you can call them. You can call them. If you still feel this way tonight, you can call. And then it gets to the evening, and it's like, I don't feel like it's so bad. It passes. It comes in surges of desperate to be with them, and then it subsides. So you just get through half a day at a time sometimes, and then over time, if they can then feed themselves with a little bit more of the good feelings, the good friends, socialising, trying to get back to who they were.
So very much like, again, the case I've dealt with, the people that, at risk of having their baby taken away because they're still addicted to heroin, and you know, it's like getting rid of the associations, taking it one day at a time, and giving yourself a new network, a new interests, and looking after yourself. It's really very much like
looking at your own identity, and it's very painful because you think this is the love of your life and you'll never love again, and you just have to take that leap of faith that there's more out there. And to be honest, if the person had that voice in them in the first place that was saying you have to get out, then that's the truth, and that's what they have to keep relying on, not trying to understand what has happened, because you might never understand fully what has gone on and what they were thinking and why they did it. But to just accept, my whole body, my whole inner voice was saying, you have to get out of this, and keep that in your head. Trust yourself, I suppose.
And I think you say that you don't want to you don't go way back into the past. You're very much about moving people on.
I think there's a lot of work
6 weeks.
People being re-traumatized by keeping going over and over. I do intensive programs, so they'll sit with me for an hour and a half and we'll talk it all out. I then write up what we've said and my further observations and things that might have come to me subsequently. And then I keep in contact, so I'll be texting and calling them. Which, you know, in that addictive stage of the trauma bond, that's what they need. It's quite intense. But after that, it's about having the tools, and then, you know, you can fly again and be fine.
Well, really, really interesting. Love to have this talk. I know there'll be lots of questions, so people can comment, they can directly message us. Sarah, thank you so much. I'm glad that in some way, some small way,
it's very instrumental.
I slightly tweaked your
is this what
your life? I guess.
Time?
I mean, and you're doing something so incredibly useful. I love the way that you're not just understanding the situation. You have a plan, and people can take action, and it's not, you know, 6-12 months, it's not forever, that you're moving them forward, and it's intense and they're accountable. So it all makes sense to me. And, you know, the lawyer bit is so simple, but it's the people's emotions that's what makes family law so complicated. So
when there's feelings involved.
There's feelings involved. So I always encourage people, and that's why I set up family law cafes, so that, you know, look at everything together holistically, the legal side, the emotional side, the psychological side. So a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.